Hello, and welcome to Games Past Their Prime. This is a show where I take a look at video games to determine if they are past their prime or not. For me to do so, though, there are a couple key categories which I look at. Story, presentation, and gameplay. Then there's a conclusion section at the end where I wrap everything up in a nice little bow. You guys have read the title. You know what game we're playing. Let's take a look at Mega Man X4. So, I don't actually have the case for the game, so I can't, really show it to you like I normally would. Yeah, this just got awkward.
Mega Man X4.
The story of Mega Man X4 depends on which character you choose to play as, X or Zero. Before that though, let's lay down some backstory. X4 takes place in the year 21XX, where humans and intelligent androids called Reploids coexist. Following the third defeat of Sigma in the previous game, a second Maverick hunting group has arisen. Before I continue, I should explain that Mavericks are Reploids that have turned evil or against the humans. Maverick hunters are tasked with taking out these Maverick Reploids. This new Maverick hunting group calls themselves the Reploforce, and are an army led by a giant Reploid named General with his second in command named Colonel. Behind the scenes, Sigma has been trying to convince the General that the other hunters are dangerous and will eventually turn on them. General at this time dismisses Sigma and wishes to not betray the humans. Zero, meanwhile, is plagued by recurring nightmares where a figure awakens him and calls him a masterpiece. This figure then orders him to destroy some type of unknown target. The Sky Lagoon, a massive floating city, is sent crashing down onto the city below it, killing countless humans and Reploids alike. Depending on who you choose, either X or Zero is dispatched to investigate the cause of the disaster. At the crash site, either hunter will meet Colonel and attempt to bring him back to Maverick Hunter HQ for investigation. Colonel denies any wrongdoing in the destruction of the Sky Lagoon and refuses to disarm and go with them out of pride. If you play as Zero, he will rescue a Reploid named Iris, who is Colonel's sister, who happened to be caught up in the mayhem. The Reploforce then begins a movement to claim independence from the humans and create a nation for Reploids only. Sounds a bit racy if you ask me. Back at the Maverick Hunter HQ, X will be greeted by a rookie hunter named Double, great name there, and Zero, who will meet back up with Iris. Double and Iris will outline the locations of the Reploid leaders who have sworn their loyalty to the Reploforce, as well as Mavericks who are unaffiliated with Reploforce that are spreading chaos during this time. Once 4 of the Mavericks are defeated, the Colonel will challenge the character you are playing as to a fight. If you are playing as X, he will escape after being defeated, or if you are playing as Zero, the fight will be stopped by Iris. Once all of the Mavericks have been beaten, either X or Zero will be sent to the spaceport where Colonel guards Reploforce's launch into outer space. Colonel will fight whoever shows up and dies after being beaten. X or Zero then infiltrate the Reploforce's space station that is also known as the Final Weapon, which is capable of destroying all human life on Earth. Depending on who you are playing here, you will need to fight a different boss. If you are playing as X, you will fight Double, because he's a double agent. And if you are playing as Zero, you will be forced to fight Iris, who happens to be torn between her feelings for Zero and her brother's ideals to have a free Reploid nation. Once either one is defeated, they will then need to fight off the General, and after defeating him, they will find out that someone else happens to be controlling the space station. I wonder who that could be.
Here's Johnny.
Sigma reveals that he himself caused the Sky Lagoon to crash in order to instigate the conflict between the Maverick Hunters and Reploforce, and announces his intention to wipe out all of humanity. Also, in Zero's story, Sigma reminds him of the time that Sigma once led the Maverick Hunters himself, and tells him of the vicious battle between the two that ended with Zero's apprehension as a Maverick at that time. In the end, Sigma ends up being destroyed by either X or Zero, but he reveals he already activated the final weapon. General appears not quite dead yet and sacrifices himself to destroy the final weapon to protect the humans after he was misled by Sigma. During this time, X or Zero are allowed time to escape the space station and return to Earth. In X's ending, he recounts all of the battles that he had to endure up to this point. During this time, Zero will contact him and tell him he did a great job and that he needs to return to Earth to rest. X then begs Zero to promise him to take care of him should he himself ever become Maverick. Zero tells X to not have such thoughts and to just return home. In Zero's ending, he happens to be wrought with pain and guilt for being unable to save any of the Repliforce members and becomes heartbroken over the death of Iris. He then wonders to himself if all Reploids are destined to become Mavericks in the end. And there you go. That is the story of Mega Man X4. I think this is actually not bad. I actually think it's actually a pretty good story. And in fact, you don't really need to play any of the other games to understand this story, though I'm sure it would help. I frankly haven't played the other X games in a while, so I'm sure there are things I missed here in the story, but I think it does a good job at explaining what's going on, why things are going on, and does a fantastic job at issuing a call to action to the players. Now, I don't think this story is perfect, but I think it did a good job and didn't get too complicated. With that said though, let's jump over into the presentation section. So right away, you may notice that this game is in 2D graphics. Now this is a bit different on the PlayStation, but one I personally welcome for various reasons. First, I think this game looks stunning with those pixel art graphics. Everything is very colorful and has a lot of detail. This is really why I'm glad for the 2D. By making it 2D, they were able to add in as much detail as they wanted without it really pushing the system to the max, unlike 3D games where you need to give up some of that resolution for that ability to make it 3D. On top of that, the art direction here is not only great in the stages, but also the FMV cutscenes. It almost looks like a high-grade cartoon or anime.
Oh, fuck yeah, this is the shit! Kill me now!
Each stage of the game is incredibly unique to itself, with unique enemies to boot. While yes, you will find the generic concept such as snow or fire levels, the stages within that concept are entirely unique. I love this because I rarely got bored of the stages. In fact, in my personal opinion, I don't think there's any bad stages in this game. I love them all, though some of them did get under my skin a few times, but that's normal for me in games anyways.
Okay. Whatever you say.
On top of that, I enjoyed all of the bosses' designs as well. I think they were made very well with cool looking attacks. Now, if I was to say there was a stage or two that it did feel a bit bland, it would be the space station level because you go here 3 different times. Though each area of that stage is different, it mostly has that same look every time you go, and you happen to do these back to back to back, so you may find yourself getting bored of the overall direction of the art by the end. Regardless though, I think one of my favorite things was looking at the art for each weapon used. Now I'll go into more detail about that later, but seeing what each special weapon or technique would do is very cool and interesting to see. Now, I want to talk about the voice acting, and this I personally didn't love. I wouldn't say it's bad, but I wouldn't exactly call it good either. This is another one of those games where you will find some really funny and cringy dialogue moments. In fact, I'm just going to play a couple here for you now.
The most powerful army in history!
Zero, please, don't fight with my brother. If you do, I'm afraid that one of you may end up...
Someone must stop Repliforce.
Zero!
No, this isn't happening! There's no reason for me to go on. What? What am I fighting for?
Now, the rest of the sound design is absolutely fantastic. From the music to the weapon sounds, I love it all. Honestly, all the music in this game is great. Now, I know I'm a bit biased here because I tend to love most Mega Man soundtracks in general, but truly, I don't think there's a single stage track in this game that I didn't like to some degree. So without further ado, I will try and pick my favorite 3 and play them for you, if I can manage to break it down to only 3. Honestly, this choice is very hard, and I know some people will likely disagree with my choices, but just know that I truly, really did enjoy all of this music in this game. Alright, so the gameplay of Mega Man X4 is what is described as an action platformer. Now this is a little hard for me to explain since this will be my first time trying to explain this, but I'll do my best. After you get past the first mission, you will be placed in a stage select screen. Here you'll be given the options of 8 different missions, each of which have its own unique stage and boss. During the missions you will move from left to right while jumping or avoiding obstacles as well as fighting off any enemies in your way. The game gives you plenty of tools to do this, and to better explain them, let's jump into the control segment real quick. Alright, so moving X is as simple as pushing left or right on the D-pad. If I press X, he will jump. If I press it again while in the air, he will hover. He will eventually fall on his own, or I can press X again and he will drop. Now I can also dash with the circle button, and I can do that while also in the air, but do note you cannot do that from the start of the game. That is an upgrade that he gets later in the game if you find the upgrade. If I press square, he will shoot just a regular buster shot, or I can hold it down and fire a more powerful shot. In this case I do have an arms upgrade that you can get later in the game, which allows me to store 4 shots. Now, we also have the special weapons. I can cycle through them with L1 or R1, or I can also do that from the start menu here. Now, another one of the upgrades I have is when I press square here to use the attack. It doesn't drain that energy meter by my health. However, I can also charge up these attacks, in which case, when I do use it, it will use that charge meter. Now, one of the special attacks you won't find on here is another weapon upgrade that I have. It's called the Nova Strike. You can see it right here on the top right. To use that, if I press R2, he will use that attack, which apparently does a lot of damage. I've never used it, but apparently it's very, very powerful. However, using it once, as you can see there, drained the entire meter. Now, if I am, say, using the fire here, and I don't want to use this, I want to use my regular buster shot. Rather than having to scroll all the way back, what I can do is I can just push triangle, and triangle will fire the regular buster shots, which I can also charge up and use normally. So very useful, but I think I've covered pretty much most of the controls of X here. What I will do is I will jump over to 0 real quick here. Alright, so a lot of Zero's controls are very similar. You move left and right with the D-pad, and you jump with X. You can dash with circle, and I can even air dash as well. Very, very similar. I mean, even square is your attack, though he does have a combo attack. If I hit it 3 times, you can see that. Very nice, very cool. However, that's pretty much where all the similarities end. There's quite a few differences. So, for example, instead of hovering, if I press X in the air, you'll do a double jump. I really love that, by the way. Very useful. And then, of course, I also have the techniques. So the techniques here, as you can see, there's only one that actually uses energy, and that is this special that you use with R2. I'll show that off in a second here. All the other ones require button combinations to do, so I'll show you those in a second here. So like I said, the special, press R2, you'll shoot a bunch of these energy orbs across the screen. Now I have the ability to do a attack while in the air, which is kind of like a spinning saber. So if I press X, you can see, and square, X and square, you'll kind of spin around with the saber. Kind of cool to look at, by the way, and very useful when you're jumping and trying to get from platform to platform, especially when there's an enemy on that platform you're jumping to. I use this a lot, pretty much, to get through most of the stage as fast as possible. Then he also has a uppercut, sort of. It's a fire uppercut saber. So if I press up and triangle, as you can see, he'll do this kind of flame sword upwards attack. This also becomes useful, especially on the last boss, because you can just spam that. It's kind of nice in some ways, to be honest. Then he also has sort of an ice attack that will freeze enemies, but you need to jump first and then do down triangle. So there we go. And then we can also dash attack. So if I press circle to dash and then triangle, he'll do a dash attack. If I can do it right. Hold on. Nope. Hold on. There we go. I think I have to be holding in the direction that I am going in. I didn't before, so there we go. And then as I was showing before, there is also a lightning attack. If I just press triangle, he will extend out his saber in sort of like a lightning form. It's kind of cool. Extends the range of his normal attacks, and it's useful on quite a bit of enemies. So the controls of Zero maybe sounds a little bit more complicated. The fact that you have the button combinations like up and triangle and jump down triangle and dash triangle, and you know, rather than just having to select the weapons and press square to use. I didn't find them to be honestly that complicated though. And I think this is because, again, just like X, you don't start with most of these. In fact, I think the only thing you really start with is like the air dash and then you're jumping, but you can't even double jump that I can recall. Maybe you can? I don't think so though. So having to learn a lot of those techniques as you're going kind of helps you memorize which ones do what. So I kind of like that they kind of do that. Not only does it show character progression, but it also forces you to learn as you go, which is kind of interesting and kind of a cool way of doing it, rather than just giving you everything and going being like, here you go, have fun, you know. Anyways, I think I've covered all of the controls that are important. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. In any case, let's head back to the main script. Alright, so now that we have covered the controls, let's talk more in depth about the game. No matter which character you play as, after you defeat a boss, you will either unlock a new weapon for X or learn a new technique for Zero. These weapons or techniques can be useful for clearing through stages faster, but they typically have two actual main functions. First main function is that every boss in the game is weak to a specific type of weapon or technique. This means that there is multiple optimal paths through the game you can do, and knowing the weaknesses of these bosses greatly helps in defeating them. This means you need to early on plan what your first mission is going to be, because this typically will determine what missions come after this. I like how there is replayability in not only having two characters you can play as, but also that you can choose to go after a different boss first, which then will change up the route you take. The second main function of the weapons or techniques is to help you find secrets or hidden power-ups. These types of power-ups are like the armor pieces for X, which greatly makes the game easier, as well as heart containers which increase max health, and of course the EX and weapon tanks. These tanks are very useful because the EX tanks are basically health tanks. You can fill them up by finding these orbs on the ground, and if you get low on health, you can go into your menu and use whatever amount is in the tank to gain that much life. For example, if you have a full tank, it'll give you full health, or if you have half a tank, it'll give you half health.
No shit.
The weapon tank can also be useful because when you are playing as X Until you get an armor piece upgrade, every time you use a special weapon, a bar next to your health will deplete. This is the amount of energy you have for that special weapon. However, with the weapon tank, you can fill back up that energy bar if need be. Thankfully, I rarely ran into needing to use this tank thanks to one of X's armor upgrades, which means unless you fire a charged up shot of that special weapon, the energy bar will not deplete. This upgrade is incredibly useful. In fact, like I said earlier, all of the upgrades are useful, such as the boots, which allow you to hover in the air for a short time, and also allow you to air dash, which, trust me, comes in handy. The helmet upgrade, which is the one that allows you to use the special weapons without using the energy for it unless charged. There are 2 arm upgrades, but you can only choose one at a time. One allows you to charge up your basic arm cannon and stock up 4 charged shots, while the other upgrade allows you to charge a more powerful charged shot that also happens to leave behind plasma balls that will deal additional damage. Then finally, there is the body upgrade, which allows X to use a powerful air dash attack called the Nova Strike, which uses full weapon energy, and of course the body upgrade also does reduce damage X receives. Sadly, Zero has no armor upgrades, but in my personal opinion, I think he is easier to play, at least for me. While he needs to get close to enemies to damage them since he doesn't have X's Buster and uses the Z Saber instead, he does more base damage with that Z Saber. On top of this, Zero feels a bit more mobile, especially after he receives a couple of the techniques that help him become even more mobile. To better emphasize this, it took me about 6 to 8 hours to beat the game as X, while it only took me about 4 to beat the game as Zero. Now, I think there are 2 reasons for this. Like I said, I think Zero is a bit easier to play for me, fits my more aggressive playstyle. And the second reason is that after beating the game once, all of the bosses and stages are the same. So because of this, I had learned the stages, I had memorized the patterns for the bosses, and the game becomes easier for that reason. While on this subject, I was originally going to talk about how brutal and hard this game is. The thing is, I don't think it's actually really all that hard. Now, for first-time players or players like me who are coming back to play after many years apart from the game, I would say this game will in fact kick your ass for a while.
Are you sure about that?
However, once you get used to the game and how it controls, it becomes pretty simplistic. Then the only thing you have to really worry about is the bosses. Once you figure out their weaknesses and their patterns, they also become pretty simple to beat. So I think there's a pretty good learning curve to this game. At first it's going to seem a bit unfair and relentless, but after you have gotten used to the controls and really dive into it, you start finding out the game is actually incredibly fair, to the point that 99% of the times you will die, it's actually typically your own fault. Either you missed a cue for an attack, or you were trying to speed through the stage too fast and forgot what was coming up next. Stuff like that. Now, on to the final boss of the game, Sigma. I found him to be pretty easy at first. See, you had to fight 3 of his forms back to back to back, with the same health bar. This sounds annoying at first, but honestly his first 2 stages or forms are incredibly easy, especially once you figure out the patterns. After a couple of deaths, I was able to pass his first 2 forms with taking very minimal damage, sometimes even none. However, his final form is kind of a dick. Even after figuring out the pattern, it kind of felt like it came down to luck in some ways. It's going to be hard for me to explain exactly what I mean, but I'm going to try, and this part might be a little long, so I apologize in advance. His final form is more like 2 boss battles that are happening at the same time. However, only one appears at a time. So one boss, you have a robot that shows up and will try to shoot you with a beam gun, while another one is a face that has 2 different attacks. In between these 2 showing up, 3 floating heads will appear and attack you. You only need to avoid them. Destroying them really does nothing, as they will respawn during the next round when they're supposed to show up. Now, I want to exclusively focus on the face that has 2 different attacks. He's annoying to fight as when you're playing X, but really infuriating when you are playing as Zero. Here's the thing. One of his attacks, he will try to suck you in and chew you up. If you place yourself in the correct position beforehand, you will be blocked from being sucked up by one of the 3 heads. However, the face is now sucking up debris around you, which can hit you. You can, of course, destroy the debris, but soon enough he will start spitting the debris back at you, which you can simply avoid by jumping on the opposite wall of him and jumping into the corner. After he's done throwing the debris back at you though, he vanishes really quickly. So if you are playing as X, you might be able to jump down fast enough and get a shot off, while if you are playing as Zero, where you need to be standing right next to him, yeah, you aren't hitting him during this attack ever. His other attack is really the one you want him to do. During this attack, he will try to blow you into a wall of spikes. However, you just need to dash at the face and you will be fine. As X, you shoot him in between your dashes, and as Zero, if you time your dashes right, you can also hit him in between your dashes. And after he's done blowing, you are typically close enough to his face to get a couple more slashes in as well. So you really need him to do this attack to do damage to that face consistently. Then at the same time, you have to try to avoid taking any damage. There were a couple of runs I thought for sure I was going to win with low health. I had beaten the robot boss and the face boss was low, only for him to spam the suck attack like 3 to 4 times in a row, and then I ended up dying not being able to dodge all the other attacks. I don't really have any complaints about this entire game except for that one thing. That final boss form feels like it comes down too much to luck, where the rest of the game feels much more skill-based. Now, don't get me wrong, if you are really good at this game, or at least better than me, maybe you don't have this issue with this form of Sigma, but that still doesn't change the fact that there is one attack that face does where you basically can't hurt him. Kinda BS if you ask me. But with that said, the rest of the game is pretty good, and I think we should go into the verdict section. The verdict of Mega Man X4 is a game not past its prime. There is basically nothing bad I can really say about this game. My only negative I even brought up is that I think the last boss's last phase feels like there is too much luck involved compared to the rest of the game. I wouldn't even consider this that much of a negative, to be honest with you. With that said though, let's jump into the top 5 reasons why this game is not past its prime. Number 1, the story is actually pretty good. Now, I don't love it, but I think the fact that this game doesn't really require you to play the other games to understand the story is kinda nice. On top of that, Zero's story is actually kind of interesting to me, but I think it's just because I really like that character, so I'm a little biased on that. Number 2, the presentation of this game is absolutely amazing. I love the graphics, I love the music, I love the FMV cutscenes, except the English voice acting. But other than that, it's great. Even if you are a huge graphics guy nowadays, you have to admit that this game actually looks really good, even now. Number 3, the gameplay of this game is very refined. You can tell after having several games under their belt, they knew exactly what this game was going to be and how they were going to achieve that. Now, I've heard complaints that this game didn't evolve enough from the previous titles, and I can't comment much on that since it's been a while since I've played those, but my next question to them would be, why try to fix something that ain't broken? Number 4, the difficulty of the game is actually a plus in my opinion. Here's the thing, the game isn't hard just to be hard, and doesn't have an insane spike in difficulty. I would say the difficulty of the game is actually pretty consistent, but it feels like it gets easier as you collect more weapons and collect those heart containers and other such upgrades. I like this a lot though, because it actually shows progression of the character. It shows that as you collect more upgrades and weapons, your character gets more powerful, which makes the game easier because of that, right until the end. You then get another spike in difficulty at the end, and this is due to the fact that the game knows you have collected all of those upgrades and takes that into account. I absolutely love this about this game. It's difficult but beatable if you analyze everything, and it shows clear progression of the character. Number 5. And then of course we reach that point where I tell you my enjoyment of this game. I absolutely love this game. I love everything about it. Even that final boss where I get annoyed, I love the challenge of that boss. Frankly, if you have not played this game, what are you doing? What rock have you hidden yourself under? Figure out a way to play this game. I promise you, you won't regret it, unless of course you don't like these kinds of games, but even then, I recommend you at least give it a try. Alright guys, that's the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did enjoy watching it, please consider subscribing. I upload videos every Sunday. Stay tuned at the end of the video to get an audio hint at what my next video will be. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and thanks for watching.